What happens when a clinically trained psychiatrist opens his mind to what his patients are telling him? What happens is an explosive change of mind. And today on Dreamland, Marla Frees discusses just such a change of mind with one of the leading past life therapists on planet Earth, Dr. Brian Weiss. He comes from a classically educated scientific background, but he listened to what his patients had to say. Then for subscribers, Brian and I get into an intimate conversation about past lives, about what may have happened to me, about future lives. It was for me a breathtaking experience. And now, here's Marla Frees and Dr. Brian Weiss.
Not a subscriber? You're missing too much. Click on the subscribe tab on unknowncountry.com today.
Welcome to Dreamland. My guest today is Dr. Brian Weiss, a graduate of Columbia University and Yale Medical School, and is the chairman emeritus of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami, Florida. As a traditional psychotherapist, Dr. Weiss came across a situation many years ago when one of his patients began recalling past life traumas that seemed to hold the key to her recurring nightmares and anxiety attacks. When she began to channel information not only about a life she had previously lived, but also remarkable revelations about Dr. Weiss and his family and his dead son. Needless to say, Dr. Weiss was astounded. That's just one of the many stories he's going to share with us today, along with his new book, Miracles Happen. But before I put him on the air, I have to warn our listeners, he's capable of hypnotizing thousands of people at a time. So grab a cup of coffee, sit up straight, and pull your car over to the side of the road. I'd like to introduce the nation's foremost expert on past life regression therapy, Dr. Brian Weiss.
Thank
Hi,
you,
Brian.
Marla. Great to be with you today.
Oh, this is thrilling. So let's start at the beginning with how this all happened to you.
Yes, as you were describing, I had come through a very formal academic training, and I was very skeptical about belief in these other matters, about the psychic world and things I couldn't really see through my usual five senses and subject to the scientific method. So I didn't believe in past lives or near-death experiences or these kinds of things. And I was a chemistry major, as you mentioned, publishing a lot of papers in psychiatry, running the Department of Psychiatry at Mount Sinai. And then a woman named Catherine came into my office, and this was around 1980, so 32 years ago. She was suffering from panic attacks and phobias, fears, depression. After a year and a half of treating her with talking therapy, she would not take any medications because she had a lifelong fear of gagging or choking. I began to use hypnosis, a kind of focused concentration, to take her back and try to find childhood memories that I felt must be causing her traumas. And that was the beginning. The first time she went back to childhood and remembered traumas, but her symptoms remained severe. The next time we did it, I asked her to go back to the time where her symptoms first began. And I thought she'd go back perhaps a little bit earlier in her childhood. But she didn't. She went back nearly 4,000 years into an ancient Near Eastern lifetime with a different body, different face, hair, and drowned in a flood or tidal wave in that ancient time. I didn't believe in past lives or reincarnation, so I thought this must be imagination or fantasy, or perhaps at the most metaphor or symbol. But her symptoms began to resolve really quickly after this memory. Lifelong fear of drowning, the gagging, the reason she couldn't take any medicines, that disappeared. She started to lose all of her symptoms as she remembered more and more of these past lives. And that was the beginning for me, more than 4,000 patients ago and 32 years ago, of these events that changed my life.
And that, of course, is the subject of your very famous book that people all know about, which is Many Lives, Many Masters. So when you talk about the clearing of it, was it actually just her being able to talk about it, or was it Was it the subsequent discussion after she was out of the regression?
I think it was actually the memory of it more than the discussion. The discussion integrates everything, puts it into focus and perspective, and that helps. But I find that oftentimes the memory is enough. For example, as you were alluding to, and I'm not doing it over the air, so people don't have to stop driving. They can just relax now. When I work with groups and people are sitting in a safe environment to relax and close their eyes, then they can go back and have past life memories. And just having the memory is oftentimes enough to clear or resolve the symptom. For example, they remember being thrown from a castle wall in the 14th century. And in their current life, the fear of heights may disappear just from the memory. The talking about it helps, but the memory alone is enough.
Well, it's interesting. When I went across the street to get a cup of coffee this morning, and I was talking to the building manager, and I told him I was interviewing you, and he said, I had the most incredible experience with Brian. I went to see him along with my family in Los Angeles, and I had this memory of being a Franciscan monk. He said, I have such detail work. I like working in painting and this detail work around these prayers that this past life showed me as a Franciscan monk. Explained that to me, that he said I had the darndest memory of these sandals that I had. And he said, I've been buying sandals like that all my life.
Yes.
These sort of like, so I thought, my God, just to have the impression of something that he has remembered for so long or had a desire about was really fascinating.
I think it's great, too. He's a doorman. He comes to have a group experience. He has a regression experience, and it changes his life. Because once people have these memories, if they remember themselves in another time or place, a different lifetime perhaps, then they start to lose their fear of death and dying because they know that there's so much more to life than meets the eye. He lived as a Franciscan monk, and now he's back again. So there's much more depth to the person, and they don't fear so much the one and done, just lifetime and then oblivion, because it doesn't work that way. Our consciousness goes on. So for all those reasons, I'm happy to hear it. And also the penetration. Here's a doorman who came and in Los Angeles. So many people come and have these experiences. Then they talk to other people, and other people then begin to open their minds. And that's such an important component, the opening of minds, because if your mind is closed, you can't learn anything new. So it's the only way to keep learning and growing and evolving. And so I'm really happy to hear that story just from this morning. Yeah.
Well, I think it's funny because years ago, you and I met in 1996 when we were both working with James von Prague, and I was very skeptical of this. I actually didn't come on the boat to Encinitas to meet you. I was there to see a homicide detective who was a psychic. And you and I discussed this, and I basically talked about the skepticism that a lot of people have. But you convinced me, I think, over a couple of glasses with you and your wife over tiramisu and Pinot Noir, that I should really take this experience with you. And it was dramatic. It changed my life, and my actual regression ended up being confirmed by someone when I stepped on the set of Everybody Loves Raymond when I came in to do a sitcom. And it's been astounding. It's given a perspective on my life that I'm so grateful for having. So back to the idea of these regressions, Brian, how often do they work? I mean, you were doing seminars where you're regressing thousands of people and also, maybe 15 at a time. What's the success rate with these? It's
virtually the same, Marla, whether it's a great big group or a little group or working one-on-one in my office with an individual. One-on-one is easier because I can talk to the person and they can answer while they stay in the deeper state. They're in a very relaxed state, a hypnotic, meditative kind of state. And so they can continue to experience whatever it is they're experiencing, let's say an ancient lifetime, and yet they can talk to me about what they're experiencing. I see this, I feel that. I recognize this person as my mother for now, but was my brother in that past life, that kind of thing. So they can stay in a deep state, talk, and continue to experience. But in a group, obviously they can't talk because that would disturb the other people. And I find big groups, small groups, it doesn't matter because their eyes are closed. So whether it's 1,000 people or 10 people, the same difference. And about 2/3 of the audience, 2/3, will have a past life memory. What I do is not always past lives. I'll take people back into childhood and into the in utero, prenatal state too. Many people remember from that time. And then we'll go into a past life. It's a kind of sequential journey backwards through time. And about 2/3 of people in a group, even the first time, will have a past life memory. So that's very exciting. In Washington, a few days ago, I gave one of these very large group regression experiences, and maybe 3,000 people there, 2,000 approximately had a past life memory. So that's a lot of people. And then they'll talk to other people, and their symptoms will start getting better. That's very exciting to me, like throwing a pebble into a pond, and you see the rippling outward. And just as you described, whether on the boat or talking to the doorman, whatever, this is how people can open their minds and share experiences and learn that there's so much more to life than meets the eye. We're so much more complex, so much more to us, and I think all of this is great, and that's why I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you today on this great program, to bring this information to even more people, although I know your audience is particularly sophisticated about these things. So we're going to be talking at a deeper level today, I know.
Well, I also want to address the fact that the healing that takes place, I mean, there are reasons that people come to see you. It's not just the curiosity of this being past life. This is really, people come to you because they do have emotional, psychological, and physical pains and recall about something, and they just can't put their finger on it. And I'd like for you to share with our listeners some of the dramatic healings that have taken place.
Well, there's so many, and you're absolutely right. The people that came to see me, that come to see me, because I'm a psychiatrist, so they tend to have more in the way of symptoms or illnesses, phobias, fears, mental, also physical disabilities. Whereas my wife, Carol, who's a social worker, and she sees people who are just more curious, because I think just knowing that you've lived other lifetimes, that has a tremendous healing effect too. Even if you don't have symptoms, you feel better about life. It puts your values into a different perspective. So she calls her clients past life tourists. They come and they're tourists and they're curious. And the ones I see, these are people, as you mentioned, with symptoms, more profound symptoms. So I remember seeing a woman, for example, at Omega Institute, and I wrote about her in one of my books too, such a dramatic case, because she had severe back pain from cancer and the radiation and surgeries subsequent to the diagnosis. And she is a very prominent woman, very well known in her field, came up to Omega and saw the chairs that they were using at that time. Now there are much more comfortable chairs there, so people shouldn't fret. But wooden chairs, and she felt she might not be able even to make it through the week. It was one of our intensive experiential workshops. But she stuck it out, and the second day she went back to ancient Jerusalem about 2,000 years ago. And in that milieu, which was rife with revolution and change, she had a healing. And in that healing, her back in that lifetime was healed. But in the present life, her back was also healed during that week. And what's interesting to me, because I see this so often, and it's always fascinating, but sometimes there's a little bit more to it. And in her case, there was a little bit more to it. It's that when she went back to the New York City where she lived, she stopped taking her pain medicines because she had no more pain. This alarmed her doctor, and he redid some of the tests, MRIs, and her back, her spine, had healed. The lesions that were there were gone. The tissue had regenerated itself. she's in her 60s, late 60s, and her hair, which had been gray, but she had it colored, so it was dark, and now started growing in dark again, as if she were a younger woman.
Oh, my God.
So
this is fascinating.
That kind of stuff, not commonplace, but when that happens and we have these like radiological confirmations and hair growing in the original color, this is really terrific and goes beyond even the ordinary healing that we see. So that's one case that I hadn't thought about that for a while, but just popped into my head when you asked, and I think that's a very dramatic one.
Well, it's fascinating, Brian, that the idea that the body retains the DNA of these lifetimes.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know if it's actual DNA, Marla, because it may be. Maybe some of this is cellular memory that's kind of passed on through the genetic material, like the DNA. But sometimes, obviously, it's not, because people die childless, not having passed on any genetic material, or they die as children, and not. So, and they remember those lifetimes also. So some of it is not through the DNA. Probably most of it is not through the DNA, but through some sort of energetic carrying on of these memories. And so I think when the body is being reformed, a new body, these memories are kind of transferred to it as part of the creation of the new body. The template must also include these ancient memories.
Well, this is fascinating. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back with Brian Weiss.
Dreamland's co-hosts are all experts in their fields, and Marla Frees is no exception. Marla is a transformational psychic medium. What does that mean? Well, she receives messages about any aspect of a person's life and can also mediate relationships between the living and the dead. If you take action on messages like that, they can change your life. Her website is marlafrees.com, where you can see her in action in her videos, read her latest news, listen to clients talk about their work with her, and read testimonials. And you can find out how to become a client of Marla Frees. That's marlafrees.com.
Imagine a tribe hidden deep in the forest, untouched by the modern world. Now imagine that they still possess the ancient magic that we have lost. They live in deep peace, in deep understanding. But then they're found. The modern world pours in on them from every side. Who will help? Who will save this miracle in the forest? Read Whitley Strieber's new ebook, The Secret of Orenda, and discover the magic. One reader says, I was captivated from the first pages. Others agree. Speaks to us on a level mere words cannot. I read it in 2 sittings, my face running with tears, my heart filled with joy. To learn more, go to orendabook.com. That's orendabook.com.
Do you remember the great Lawrence Gardner? Well, I certainly do remember his great, extraordinary books and his incredible vision of the past, the true past of mankind. Did you know that in the unknowncountry.com subscriber section, you'll find over 15 special interviews and dreamlands with Lawrence Gardner dating back to 2004. In order to find them, all you have to do is go to unknowncountry.com, put the name Lawrence Gardner, Laurence Gardner, into the search engine on the upper right of the home page, and they will all pop up. If you are a Dreamland subscriber, you can listen to any one of them by simply clicking on it. You'll be asked for your username and password, and you can start to listen right away. If you're not a subscriber, this is how to get information about the lost secrets of Jesus, the truth about Moses, the extraordinary truth about Moses, about white powder gold, what it is, how it works. Incredible material only on unknowncountry.com and only in the amazing unknowncountry.com archive. Subscribe to unknowncountry.com today. It's just $12.95 for 3 months, and it will feed your mind. Don't miss this enormous and beautiful resource. Click on that subscribe tab on unknowncountry.com today.
Brian, I certainly do want to talk about your new book.
Oh, sure.
But while we're on the topic of DNA, our listeners who are interested in extraterrestrial or out there in the cosmos, I remember something about, is it in Same Souls, Many Bodies, where you have done some work with people who have come from other galaxies. Could you share with our listeners about that?
Yes, this happens from time to time also. And you're right. This is from a previous book, Same Soul, Many Bodies. Even though in Miracles Happen, there are always more cases of this sort. But I remember one young man that I was seeing in therapy. So this was a one-to-one session, not from a group. And Patrick is his name. He during a past life memory went way back and went back about 60,000 years. Now, usually when someone goes that far back in the earth, we think of it as this is going to be very primitive, maybe an aboriginal type of thing in Australia or in some place in Africa. But his wasn't. He had come as part of a migration from another star system, and he didn't name it, so I don't have a name for you. But I've had other people who have described similar phenomena. And this, I guess I was trying to remember now, where he lived or his people lived, it was not a healthy situation. It was declining, the atmosphere, and they came to the earth because it was somewhat similar in composition. And these had bodies, these people that were similar to humans, but they weren't humans. They migrated in this vast migration about 60,000 years ago, I think, and joined other groups that had migrated here at other times, and then interacting with the emerging humankind of the earth, they would get, of course, caught up in the reincarnational cycle. So Patrick, when he came here, he was entrusted to hide, in a way, the stored wisdom of his race, of his people. They had brought that to the earth, of course, as well. They were very proud of their accomplishments. They were very cultured, highly intelligent, sophisticated people, obviously capable of space travel, and came here, and he hid it in such a way that when our technology develops to the point that this wisdom can be discovered, found, then it will be able, of course, to find it. So it couldn't be found until humans could use it more responsibly. So it's still hidden here somewhere, and that's another interesting thing. But then he was an elder here, and people of other migrations, and his people, and the evolving humans would all come to him for advice and counseling and things like that. And so I think there were these infusions of immigration from other star systems, and that helped to, to develop even the course of human evolution. Because
Are you talking about seeding the planet?
No, it was already seeded when he came here. Humans have been here, evolving for hundreds of thousands of years, longer. But he came about 60,000 years ago. They joined in to the evolutionary process. Every group coming here from other dimensions or galaxies, physical or non-physical dimensions, helps in human evolution, bringing ideas and concepts. So all of it is helpful. But it wasn't the original seeding. We were already far along as of 60,000 years ago.
Interesting. And I understand that you have worked with John Mack.
Yes. John was a psychiatrist too, as you know, and he taught at Harvard. And so I had been writing these books about past lives and reincarnation ever since Many Masters came out in 1988, and I got a call from John Mack, who wanted me to know that in his work he was doing regressions to take people back to abduction experiences or other extraterrestrial types of experiences. Yes. And in doing this, he was finding that many of his patients also were remembering past lifetimes, because he would use a similar technique as mine, take people back, and yet even though he was going back to events in the current lifetime, people still would kind of take advantage and remember past lives as well. So John said to me, Brian, I'm confirming your work. I want you to know that. And I said, that's great, because any, reputable and bright psychiatrist that confirms my work, this is a good thing. So then he invited me to come up and do a workshop in Boston, and I taught for half the day. He taught for half the day. We had a panel together. It was great. I learned a lot from him, and he certainly expanded my thinking as well. And, of course, it's always good for me to get confirmation from, such an intelligent, highly regarded psychiatrist that he was finding exactly what I was finding and writing about. So all of that was great, and that was a wonderful experience I had in Boston with him.
Well, I'd like for someone who is really deeply connected to John Mack to have a regression with you and find out if they're still connected to him and see what he's got going on over there. I'd love to see who he's influencing. Well, let's get to your book. Miracles Happen. Is this your 9th book? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Marla. The 9th book is a 6th major book. Miracles Happen is a book that I wrote with my daughter Amy, who's a social worker and a writer and a therapist too. And we collected some of the best stories of people who have had experiences, particularly in these intensive workshops over the past 20-some years. And of the hundreds and hundreds of people that sent us their experiences and stories, and we've been getting these over the years, of course, we picked 75 or 80 of the most moving and important stories and wrote them, got their permission to use them in their own words. So people sent their own stories in their own words from all over the world. Many, many countries are represented. And then I commented on every story. So there are stories about healing grief and stories about healing physical illnesses and psychological or emotional maladies, spiritual and mystical stories, psychic and intuitive stories, mediumistic stories. It's really, to me, a great collection of stories, but more than a collection of stories, a kind of collection of possibilities, transformative possibilities, where we can all get to. And so I like this book, and I know you've had a chance to see it.
Oh, I love it. I think that this is the kind of book that you can pick up and turn to any page, because each story is rich enough to stand on its own. And the transitions between each story are filled with your wisdom and guidance. And you and Amy have done a lovely job. It's going to be something that I'm going to be giving for holiday presents. But I would really love it if you would share the story. Let's go to one of the stories, A Vast Explosion of Love. Could you share with our listeners the story of Lee?
Yes, that's one of the stories that I really resonated to. Lee is a woman from South Africa who wrote to me, and I asked her if she could send in even more detail or information about the story, because it was very moving. She had a marriage to an RAF, a Royal Air Force pilot, who's a very left-brain person and very skeptical. So she was more into the spiritual and mystical, and he was not. And he would always say, Lee, you're being weird. And this really, that was what he always told her. And in a way, this affected their relationship because there were things they couldn't talk about. So it wasn't really as fully developed their relationship as it could have been. And there were areas of privacy and where they didn't share. And she had gone away for 6 weeks to visit her children somewhere in France. She had 3 boys, and while she was away, he picked up Many Lives, Many Masters. That's why she wrote to me, her husband Richard, and read the book, and when she came back, he had changed, and their relationship became even better, and they got really close. And then visiting one of their sons again, he said to her, Lee, if anything happens to me, I want you to know that these past few years since he read Many Lives has been the best of my life, and we won. And he died of a heart attack 2 days later.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, she was devastated, and so were the boys. And this happened in France. So what happened was about 2-3 days after his death, they're still in France, she had a visit from him. And he put his arms around her, Richard, whispered into her ear what we always hear, Lee, I love you, don't grieve so much, and so on. I'm always there. It's so much better than you even can imagine over here. He's on the other side. And he visited each of the sons and whispered to them the same message separately. And they all thought they were going mad, but then they, thank goodness, compared what happened, and it was a tremendous relief to them. So he came to them, then he came to Lee again through their dogs, and came with a particular message, kind of a mediumistic thing, to a neighbor who was not a medium, saying, I am a dolphin. Tell Lee, I am a dolphin. We were together 900 years ago. And that was his RAF squadron, the Dolphin Squadron. And he said, never believe anything. If I ever, die in a crash or anything, and I'm trying to get you a message, or I'm lost and I'm trying to get you a message, unless I say, I am a dolphin. And her friend gave her that message, I am a dolphin. So, and through mediumistic message, then she came on a cruise, that I was giving workshops on, and she had a regression experience where she went back to that lifetime with Richard around the year 1100, and he was a monk and she was a nun, and they couldn't consummate it, but they were in love, and at this time, 900 years later, they could consummate and be married. So everything fit together, and all the elements of this are in that story. Past lives, regressions, life after death. We're always being reunited. Death doesn't really separate us. Yes, physically, but emotionally and spiritually we're still connected because love never stops. I like that story, and it's so much more beautiful than I just described because I'm not reading it. So her words are absolutely beautiful when she puts it together.
Well, there's a little bit of controversy too, because she had a sister, didn't she, that was into she was probably a fundamentalist.
Yes,
that told her she was raising spirits, and she called her the Witch of Endor. And
yes,
that
her sister did, Marla, and they didn't talk for several years. But then the sister's minister, I think, said to her, "No, this was a vast explosion of love." I think that's where the title of this story comes from. And don't mess it up. Like don't take this from your sister. So her sister then talked to her, and I'm sure it's all in the timing. Some people are more closed-minded, some more open-minded. Her sister, I'm sure, hearing more from Lee and from her nephew, Lee's sons, will have her mind opened up more too. So it's all, as I said, in the timing. So I see that. Look at you. On the cruise ship, your mind was in one way, and then years later, we look back and say, oh, well, I'm here now, but I was there then, and that's okay.
Years later? Are you kidding me? It was instantaneous. I remember that. The regression was so amazing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Well, let's just take a break for me to collect my thoughts about it. We'll come back. You and I will talk about that cruise to Encinitas.
Dreamland's co-hosts are all experts in their fields, and Marla Frees is no exception. Marla is a transformational psychic medium. What does that mean? Well, she receives messages about any aspect of a person's life and can also mediate relationships between the living and the dead. If you take action on messages like that, they can change your life. Her website is marlafrees.com, where you can see her in action in her videos, read her latest news, listen to clients talk about their work with her, and read testimonials. And you can find out how to become a client of Marla Frees. That's marlafrees.com. Do you remember the great Lawrence Gardner? Well, I certainly do remember his great, extraordinary books and his incredible vision of the past, the true past of mankind. Did you know that in the unknowncountry.com subscriber section, you'll find over 15 special interviews and dreamlands with Lawrence Gardner dating back to 2004. In order to find them, all you have to do is go to unknowncountry.com, put the name Lawrence Gardner, Laurence Gardner, into the search engine on the upper right of the home page, and they will all pop up. If you are a Dreamland subscriber, you can listen to any one of them by simply clicking on it. You'll be asked for your username and password, and you can start to listen right away. If you're not a subscriber, this is how to get information about the lost secrets of Jesus, the truth about Moses, the extraordinary truth about Moses, about white powder gold, what it is, how it works. Incredible material only on unknowncountry.com and only in the amazing unknowncountry.com archive. Subscribe to unknowncountry.com today. It's just $12.95 for 3 months, and it will feed your mind. Don't miss this enormous and beautiful resource. Click on that subscribe tab on unknowncountry.com today.
Imagine a tribe hidden deep in the forest, untouched by the modern world. Now imagine that they still possess the ancient magic that we have lost. They live in deep peace, in deep understanding. But then they're found. The modern world pours in on them from every side. Who will help? Who will save this miracle in the forest? Read Whitley Strieber's new ebook, The Secret of Orenda, and discover the magic. One reader says, I was captivated from the first pages. Others agree. Speaks to us on a level mere words cannot. I read it in 2 sittings, my face running with tears, my heart filled with joy. To learn more, go to orendabook.com. That's orendabook.com.
Brian, wasn't that your first cruise where you started doing groups? Is that correct?
It's true. That was my first cruise. I didn't know how it would work, so I tried it out with James and a few other people, and it worked out pretty well because people on a cruise ship tend to relax a lot and not disturbed by everyday business things and traffic and commuting, so they could get into deeper states, and we do these longer sessions, and so it turned out to be an interesting way to do it. And then, of course, we found, James and I, that we could choose wherever we wanted to go for a cruise. Tahiti, Mediterranean, Alaska, Caribbean, beautiful places, and take along 100 or 200 or 300 people, have these fabulous experiences, and then do tours also in spiritual places and spiritual sites. So it worked well. Anyway, I like doing these 3-hour sessions on the cruise ship where I can take groups back, and now I bring people up onto the stage and demonstrate what individual regressions look like, but that was the beginning for me. And not for doing the workshops in groups. I was doing that in hotel settings or retreat settings, but that was the first time on a ship.
Well, I think it was a group of 17 of us, and I don't like cruise ships, and I was claustrophobic, and I sat in the back, or I laid down in the back, I found out. Well, I was sitting at first, and of course I woke up and I was on the floor, but what happened in that is dramatic because it changed my perspective about my life and everything else, because I was taken to some structure that was in the middle of the sky, in the middle of the black with all the stars, and they showed me where I was going to have to come back. At first they showed me Greece, and I said, no, been there, done that. So then they showed me the world in North America, and they gave me instructions, and then I ended up in a room that was like a court, a high council, like in the courts where they were sitting up high, and there were beings that basically told me what I needed to do, which I didn't remember at the time, and I signed these papers, and I believe I begrudgingly came back.
Mm-hmm.
So
a spiritual experience.
It was incredibly spiritual, and then to have this woman on that set of the sitcom reiterate it for me, it was daunting. It was something that changed my life forever, and I really want our listeners to look up wherever Brian's going to be. You and your wife, Carol, teach at the Omega Institution. You teach regression therapy. So tell us about that, too.
Every year we teach therapists to learn the techniques of regression therapy. We don't train them to be therapists, of course, but we can train therapists to do regression therapy in 5 intensive days there at Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. It's a retreat setting, so again, not bothered by traffic and everyday concerns, but you can get into deeper states there. We've been doing that since 1991, so it's a great location for doing that. And people come from many different countries and have these trainings. You don't have to be a therapist to come, but about 50 to 60% of the people are. And the other people are there to have a week of intense experiences, because they will have many intense experiences. They will. And they're working in the day, at night, and the therapists are working with them also, and we are. So it's a great week. We love doing that. And people can just check my website. It's just my name, brianweiss.com. That schedule of Omega and other places and will be in it. For example, like going to Los Angeles or whatever. If someone in Los Angeles wants to see when I'll be there, they just have to look on the schedule. And also there are questions and answers and other information there. So that's a good, quick way to find out where I'll be.
Well, you also have CDs as well, and I have had people who have been getting ready to cross to the other side, been very ill, that have used your CDs and it's helped them so much. Can you tell us some of the CD work you do, and how is it that people can possibly take one of these CDs and have one of these regression experiences at home?
Well, I've been noticing, Marla, and thanks for your kind words, and telling me that it's helping people making the transition, because that's really why I do the work that I do. That doing a CD or listening to a CD is like being in a workshop. Mm-hmm. And the first CD I did came from a workshop. It was recorded, and then afterwards I made a little bit better quality one by going into a studio. But if you're listening to a CD with your eyes closed, it's just like sitting in a workshop. So we'll do a 25 or 30-minute regression or meditation or stress reduction. It doesn't have to be about past lives. Half of them are, but the other half are not. They're for meditation and stress, anxiety, just visualizations, mindfulness, training, this kind of thing. And it's very safe. People have been using it since the early 90s. And people do. The same 2/3 of people and more, as they practice, will have past life experiences or learn how to meditate or get rid of stress. And it's been a way to reach a lot more people without having them have to come to a workshop. You know, say someone is living in a remote area of Canada. They can just get a CD. They don't have to fly in and stay in a hotel and go to the workshop. They could actually listen at home.
Which one of the CDs do you really recommend for this particular regression? Is there one in particular you like?
There are a couple, but I would say the Spiritual Progress one. Spiritual Progress, because that's the longest and it's the most recent, so it's kind of more up to date of what I'm doing now, and it's about 7 or 8 minutes longer too than the others. But they're all a little bit different. So this way, some of the people will use more than one, so they're not always hearing the same thing. It gives a little more variety. But there's not much difference between them, really. Some like the music on a different one, like through a door into different times and places, and some like this technique a little bit better. But Spiritual Progress would be the one that I guess would recommend if people wanted to try that one first.
Well, the only difference that I would imagine is what happened in our group, where we all stood up. We couldn't believe what happened, and we had to blurt out immediately everything, so that we would tell everybody and have everybody remember it. And, I was just remembering the last time I saw you in New York when James was there. This was probably back in 2007. You were doing a large group, and I sat way in the back again. And, I kept getting up, walking around, trying to find out where the cigarette smoke was coming from. And I kept closing the doors. I was going out. I mean, I'm sure that I was disturbing some people at the time, but you were regressing us into the womb. And I did not realize at the time that my mother smoked the entire time that I was in that womb, and I was smelling that smoke.
That's how it works, Marla. That's very real. Wow. Yeah, we've had so many people. They'll remember these things from prenatal in utero times and then confirm it with their parents, just like the smoke.
Oh, it was crazy. Well, there's so many things that you and I could talk about this and go on and on and on, but the book is just lovely. It's wonderful. It's one of those pieces that all of us who are interested in this, and even those of us, of course, who aren't as familiar with this, should be picking up. It's a tremendous piece to have in your collection. And I noticed that you're going to be in Pasadena in October 26th to 28th, doing the Hay House program, You Can Do It. So tell our listeners a little bit about what that is.
Yes, there'll be lots of speakers there, mostly Hay House speakers, but others too. And we've been doing these programs all over the world with Hay House. So I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be doing two programs. One as part of the weekend, which is a shorter program, like 90-minute workshop on the weekend where we will do one regression. But on the Friday before that, I'll be doing a full-day workshop. So this will be a smaller group because it's more intensive, just me, the full day, and we'll be doing several regressions and intuitive exercises and other healing exercises. So that Friday will be the long one, full day. Sunday will be a shorter one with a bigger group, and that's a lot of fun because there'll probably be thousands, 3,000 to 5,000 people there in California. Of course, there'll be spread apart many, many speakers there. It's a great holistic weekend. So I enjoy doing that, and I'll be there with Amy, my daughter. We'll also be, I think we'll be signing at the Barnes & Noble in Santa Monica on the Thursday night before that. So if people go on our website, they can find smaller and free events that we'll be doing in the Los Angeles area also, in addition to the Hay House weekend.
Brian's website is brianweiss.com. Those of us who know your work want to thank you so much for the tremendous contribution to the many worlds and the lives that you touch. And those listeners who don't know anything about Brian, pick up a book, listen to a CD. But if you're in an area where he's going to be, just go. Just go and have this wonderful experience. It's delightful. I think that Brian's mellifluous voice is just so wonderful, and I never thought in my wildest imagination that I could be regressed the way that you have done with not just myself, but so many other people. So thank you, Brian. I'm so proud to know you, and I'm so glad that you were with us on Dreamland. And once again, Brian's website is brianweiss.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla.
You've been listening to Dreamland. Be sure to tune in again next week. Dreamland is brought to you by UnknownCountry.com and our family of subscribers. Our news editor is Ann Strieber. Our science reporter is Linda Bolton Howe. Our webmaster is Daniel Stiegel. And I'm your Dreamland announcer, Brian Arnold. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.